Did I tell you we're fostering puppies right now?
No. Oh,
Yeah.
and you know what? I think Mariah might have mentioned that actually. How is that going?
Um, as good as fostering puppies can go.
How many do you have?
Two.
Okay.
It was like Friday, and Megan said she saw on Facebook that the shelter that we worked with last time
Mhm.
was getting a group of them up this weekend. I was like, I can't handle that right now. Like, we have too many things going on.
Right.
And then Sunday,
And she's
her and
like,
the kids are like,
I'll take that under advisement.
yes, you can send that into the complaint department. They
Yes.
will be back due in 6 to 8 weeks.
If you'd like to file your dissenting opinion, that's great. Here's the P.O. box. You can send that to.
Yeah, I know. I just got like looks, eyebrow raises from my kids.
Right.
What do you think you have anything to do with this?
I'm sorry. That's not why we were telling you.
Yeah, so they went to get one on Sunday and came back with two
Oh,
because
okay.
they were told two is easier than one.
Who told them that?
I think they have a salesperson there that
Right. Right. I hear three is the optimal number, really.
Yes.
Once you go over three, you have to go to seven, though, because then at that point, because 4 and 5 is a terrible, terrible number. You can't have that.
Yeah, right. Six? No one cares about six?
No, not at all. You can't even get six. Actually, they won't even
The
give you
worst.
six.
Oh, that's a
No,
shame.
unless you're in the DeVille family, and then they have special in Cruella and her team.
Yeah, so they're a handful because they're puppies. But to be fair, they have been a little easier with two just because they don't cry as much and they don't need you all the time. Like they just kind of like pounce on each other,
I can see
lay
that,
on
yeah.
each other.
Right.
Yeah.
They have their own, they have each other to keep each other company and entertain each other for a little bit there until
Yep.
they really need something. That's
Yep.
kind of cool. What kind of puppies are there?
Black.
The dark kind.
They're mutts.
Are they the ones with 4 legs?
I believe so.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
Does the tail count as a leg?
it does if it needs to.
Okay.
Depends. Depends on what forms you're filling out.
Yeah. No, they're mutts. They've got to have some lab in them. One definitely looks more pit, has that like squared off face.
Right.
One has a longer face. I mean, they're adorable.
I feel like every shelter dog you get is going to have some pit bull in them. Just that's what it is.
Right. Exactly.
Apparently, they're very prolific.
Yeah. It's but yeah, they're sweet. And Celia and Beck are loving playing with them. And yeah, I keep forgetting that it's not our job to train them.
Right. Okay.
Just socialize them. So just play with
Just
them
let 'em
and
play.
have people over to be around.
That's cool. Which rescue?
Small miracles,
Oh, okay.
like Ellicott City.
Oh, okay. So like they're fancy dogs. They're like Howard County dogs out there. Like sort of they come built with pretense. Even their shelter dogs are like
They did. They stepped in our house and kind of furrowed their brows and gave me a look.
Yeah. They're like, kind of espresso do you even have here? Look at this place. Get this. It's really weird.
Yeah, real snooty.
Right.
Welcome to Native Tongues. This week, we got a New York Times bestselling writer and screenwriter. He's the founder of Cemetery Dance Publications, the author of the books Chasing the Boogeyman, Becoming the Boogeyman, and the upcoming book Memorials. He also co-authored the books Gwendy's Button Box and Gwendy's Final Task with Stephen King. We dive into this and much more coming up, so stick around. Let's welcome Richard Chizmar.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
how you guys doing?
We're
Good.
great. How are you?
I'm good. Finally returning to human.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling better and finished this book, so that's the big thing off my plate.
I saw some Instagram posts of stacks of cover plates. Do I have that right?
Oh yeah, the book plates. I'm
Yeah.
gonna people think I'm gonna sit down and sign all 10,000 at once. Yeah, I've got a few months to sign those.
You need a
Gotcha.
stamp. Just
Yeah, I wish.
knock them out fast.
So I'm a layman. What's a book plate? Like I saw the stacks of it too. What is that for?
I mean, essentially, it's it's no different than like this postage label. It's, adhesive on the back in case they want to put it on like the title page or the end paper. And it's got a picture of the book cover, and it's got my name and a line, and I just sign them.
Oh, okay. And it's a sticker that goes into the book.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
They can't just print them with your signature on?
Yeah, they can. I don't know if anybody would want them, although I am absolutely positive that on some of these books, it's harder to find one without my signature than it is
Yeah.
than the ones with them. So
That's cool.
That's
So
great.
this is Memorials. Is that it?
yeah, that's the next one.
Okay. Is there anything you can tell us about it? I read the synopsis and it sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right in there in the synopsis. Coming out in October. It's the biggest thing I've written by far, the largest.
How long?
150,000 words. So,
Hmm.
I mean, Boogeyman was like 90 something. Becoming the Boogeyman was like 110, I think. So,
Oh,
yeah, it's like a
it's a
whole,
jump.
it's a monster, and it kept growing, all through rewrites and everything. So,
How long did it take you?
you know what? That is a good question. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look and see. I think writing the book itself, probably 6 months.
Yeah.
Then rewrites were, I probably did rewrites for 6 weeks. So,
Did that include outlines?
I didn't really outline it, which could be why it grew to such large proportions. I don't know, as to the other ones, but yeah, I didn't really outline it. I kind of just went and had fun doing that for a change.
All right. Where'd this one come from? Like in the chambers of your mind, I guess.
You know what? It came from a movie idea. I thought of it first as a script,
Yeah.
probably 15 or 20 years ago.
Wow.
It's funny because when the synopsis finally came out and with the cover and all that, I heard from several people in the film industry. They're like, "You finally did it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I finally did it as a book." The idea had always stuck in my mind of those roadside memorials, and how they kind of came out of nowhere, the popularity. And then if someone was kind of doing an investigative report on them and started recognizing these similarities and
Interesting.
that were unsettling as opposed to, peace signs or something.
Uh-huh.
And it kind of went from there.
Yeah,
Okay.
without being disrespectful to people, but we have like sort of a permanent one now, like on one of the roads right by our neighborhood.
Oh, here too.
It's got like lights and like
Oh, yeah.
all kinds of things like candles and all
Yeah,
that.
one of the ones that I wrote about in the book has Christmas lights all over it, and
Yeah.
I mean that's the thing. I mean, back in the '80s is when I first started noticing them, and they started way back. I mean, I cover some historical stuff in here too, and they started like in the Southwest mainly. But man, I remember because I just got my driver's license back in like 82, 83, and I just remember all of a sudden starting to see them everywhere. And I covered in there too about there's like legislation to shut them down in certain places, and there's like rules and regulations about what can be included and what can't be. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. How much research, like, is that typical for most of your books? Do you doing that much, like, sort of digging into history?
Well, with the Boogeyman book, with the first Boogeyman book, I definitely did.
Sure.
I definitely had to do a decent amount of research about the town and all that, because you grow up someplace, and just because all the shortcuts doesn't mean you really know about the town. So that was fun to kind of do the research, and then you kind of blur it, fact and fiction, and make stuff up and throw it in there, and felt completely irresponsible, like I was supposed to be writing a nonfiction book, and I'm just like, I don't feel like looking up more, so I'm going to make up this time period.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, and then like with the last Gwendy book, there was a lot of space stuff. But fortunately, we had Steve's assistant, Robin, who's awesome. She did a ton of research for us, and every once in a while we ran into something, and Steve would just say, "Let's just make it up." So yeah,
I challenged somebody else to come and debunk it.
Yeah,
right.
I grew up in Annapolis, and so when I was in college, I took a 400 level history of Maryland, thinking that I grew up in Annapolis and I've done Maryland history my whole life. I should be able to be a breeze, and it was very much not.
No, I bet
It was not. Like, again, you think someplace.
Yeah.
It's funny though, in reading Chasing the Boogeyman, I'm sure you've heard this a lot too, but so I grew up in Cape St. Clair, Maryland, which is like sort of just suburb of Annapolis, right before the Bay Bridge.
Okay.
And but man, like the similarities of like the small town, like of how you described growing up in Edgewood versus like what we were doing. It's all like same stuff. I guess it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, that was the coolest part of hearing from readers on that book, was that I didn't know, how they would connect. Let's put it this way. There was a little bit of last minute nerves, because right before the book was releasing and I realized it had a lot of buzz, I kind of stepped back and thought, wait a minute, it's, the Boogeyman is just like little campfire story and it's confined to this one little town and me. And I'm
Yeah.
who's going to care about that? I started getting a little nervous. And then when I started hearing back from readers, it was so rewarding because it was a great reminder for me too, as a storyteller, that, you know what, even if the story is actually about you, it's not really about you. It's about making those connections with the readers. And I heard from so many people who essentially said, hey, you wrote about my childhood, or you wrote about my hometown. You wrote about my best friend's, hometown. And I used to go there and visit every summer. And I was telling someone just probably a week or two ago, I had so many emails and notes about popping tar bubbles in the street. All these people, writing in and saying, or telling me at signings, I'd completely forgotten I'd done that when I was a kid. And just as soon as I read it, it all came back to me. So that was cool. And again, a great reminder for a writer that you just never know what is going to resonate with readers. And sometimes it is those little details that kind of paint a picture for them. So that was cool.
Yeah. Well, I think that worked because you didn't have rose-colored glasses. You didn't kind of paint this kind of glorified image of, the 80s small town. It was very grounded.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of Anytown, USA,
I tried. I mean, what's funny is there are quite a few people, I say quite a few, but I can probably remember a half dozen or so people who did comment. They're like, "Hey, did we grow up in the same Edgewood? Because my Edgewood was a little rougher and a little rougher around the edges, a little bit more downtrodden." And I'm like, "No, I cover that in there, and I especially cover Becoming the Boogeyman. How the town has kind of in many ways regressed." But I'm like, no, that was kind of the point of the book is that those sections I was writing from the viewpoint of the innocence of youth. And it was my world. And that's why when later, even though I was in my early 20s, I was kind of on that bridge to adulthood. So there was still that innocence intact until the murder started. And then it was more about my own innocence and the innocence of the place that I always considered, the hub of my world, the safe place to go home to, how that had been fractured and broken and how, realizing even as it was continuing to happen that the place would never be the same again. So, because I tried to write it honestly from my viewpoint. And even some of the stuff about my friends, it borders on kind of disgusting from time to time, but it's like, you know what, that's what, you get a bunch of 12-year-old boys together and there's going to be
too much time on their hands.
More than your fair share of disgusting stuff going on when there's, back then there was no cell phones. There were no, video games until later. So yeah, what we had, what we did was get up to mischief every day.
I would say that could last for years beyond 12 years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even with we say it all the time. That's the cool thing. I'm still friends with all these guys. I still see a bunch of them on a regular basis.
Wow.
And we talk and we text. And I can't tell you how many times one of us has just stopped and said, thank God there were no cell phones.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Back then, number one, our parents would have been able to keep tabs on us. We were absolutely dumb enough to be like, let's record us doing this instead of us just doing it. So you have that, ever powerful sort of denial.
Right.
I don't know who did it. It wasn't us.
The story is always going to be better than anything you could have recorded or whatever. You know what I mean? Leaving it to the imagination is actually a lot better in a lot of ways.
Yes. Well, I had to address that too. People are like, well, did you kind of take the liberty with some of those stories and exaggerate? And I'm like, no, I really didn't. I said, because I really, that was my goal in writing the book, is I really wanted to be as honest as I could. So with those stories, I wrote them as they happened. I could have exaggerated some, but whether it's my buddy, stabbing his brother in the leg with a knife because they got in an argument over something ridiculous and ambulance and everything else coming, or us, going up on the gas station roof and mooning traffic and my dad driving by, all that stuff really happened.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely a line that you guys crossed that we probably didn't cross with my friends as much, not as violent. But I would say, from as far as the rose-colored glass, I mean, I think when you're a kid, you don't know that that's not like normal stuff or whatever, that sort of rougher edges. You just don't see it. Like, we had a guy that you would just see walking down the main street, and he always had no shirt, a bandana, and a 12-pack of beer under his arm.
Yeah.
We called him Freebird. His name was Freebird. I think the adults might have called him Freebird. I don't know. but that was just normal. And it was like, all right, that's the guy. And then we know where he's going. He's going over to the basketball courts. That's where they're going to stand and drink beers and all that stuff.
We had guys like that. And we had a couple girls like that too, who would walk around and they acquire their own nicknames. And it was, one of my favorite things is after Boogeyman, my oldest son Billy, he got a chance to read it. And he just kind of, when he was finished, one of his biggest reactions was just kind of he was in awe of. Well, the first thing he said was, he goes, "You guys were like a bunch of street urchins just running around your town." And I'm like, that's what it was like growing up back in the 80s and the 70s. I'm like, again, no video games, no cell phones. So you went out, you found your friends, or you banged on doors.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it was just, hey, I got to be back by noon for lunch. But, if I call my mom and say I'm eating lunch at your house, then I don't have to be back. And then all of a sudden you don't have to be back till dinner. And
right.
No idea that you were practically in another county, or that you were on the roof of the elementary school.
Right. Or in a sewer drain.
Yeah. We did
the sewer drain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think about that and I'm like, what an idiot. You couldn't pay me to go down there now. But we were down there happily. We were down there just, unbelievable. But
yeah. And we knew what streets got rougher, like just around the edges of Baltimore. Like there was neighborhoods, and then, I mean, you know how it is. Their neighborhoods are right next to each other, and one street can change everything. So we would push our luck and ride our bikes down there and like see what trouble we can get into and get out as fast as possible, and just
or even house by house. A lot of times, like in our neighborhood, there were we were constantly taking shortcuts through hedges and bushes, and we knew which fences you could hop, and which dogs would just like bark at you, and which ones would rip you a new one, and which owners would come out and throw stuff at you, and the whole thing, and we knew why this guy was grumpy. His garbage was always full of liquor bottles, and so I love that idea that it is the kids that really know the town secrets, and that was kind of something I wanted to explore there too. Because man, once you grow up, you're no longer, for the most part, you're no longer crawling through hedges, and for years, I've always wanted to take my kids out and throw stuff at cars just for the fun, because they're like, oh, I can't even imagine how fun that would be to just pluck a car in the side with a snowball and hear that boom. And I'm always like, well, maybe on your birthday, your mom will let us go out and do it. And she's right. She's like, absolutely not. You guys will get shot, or, now you get arrested. And whereas back then we tried to get chased. We tried to kind of poke.
Snowballs were a nice day. We would throw like black walnuts. You can.
We threw anything. We threw. I think I probably left this part out because it was too weird. But we literally threw Lincoln logs. We threw anything. We had plenty of crab apples and all those things, and we never resorted to eggs and something that was truly damaging, unless it was, a special circumstance, like we were after somebody or something.
Right.
I'll never forget, the guy who actually stabbed his brother in the leg. He threw an ice ball and it knocked out an entire back windshield. And that was like the horriblest. I mean, we actually got on him for that. And he's like, I didn't know it was ice. And I'm like, you liar! I saw you over there. You had, you're like soaking it in a puddle. But most of the time, did you
scatter, or did you guys did you get in trouble?
Oh no, that's a scatter. That's a run.
Yeah, we scattered like crazy. We always scattered. I mean, but sometimes we did it purposely slower than others so that we chased. But yeah, it was. I mean, I could do a whole chapter on the throwing at cars things, and because it really was like this obsession with us. I mean, you'd be and sometimes it would, we'd be walking down the street right out in the open on the sidewalk, and like I didn't do this because I didn't have a death wish, but Jimmy Cavanaugh was notorious for like, we're just walking down the sidewalk and all of a sudden there's a car going in the other direction, and he waits until it's just barely past us and nails it, in the back with something, and gotta run. And half the time we were like carrying our school books or backpack, right. But yeah, the whole covert, hiding in the bushes, waiting till dark. Yeah, that was always. I mean, I would love to go out and do it again. It's what I told Kara. I'm like, well, maybe I'll hire a couple people to drive by and let the kids throw at their car.
The simulated experience.
And I'm like, I can start a business like this. I can start a business. It's like a carnival. Go outside, just Venmo me $100, and for a half an hour you can throw. I'll get 5 of my buddies and we'll drive by your house repeatedly, just so you can get the thrill of returning to childhood. But
it's kind of a cottage industry. It's a cottage industry of experiential vandalism and neighborhood terror.
I'm convinced there's enough freaks out there who would do it. I mean, because I would. Definitely. I'd be like sending over my $100 right now, and I'd probably end up doing it like twice a month. Because it would be such great stress relief.
True.
There's a great Rush line that's you're only immortal for a limited time.
Yeah.
And like, I think getting older, you look back and I'm like, man, that's because like back in the day, like you were invincible. Like you weren't going to get arrested. You know, that wasn't going to happen until somebody breaks a windshield and you're like, oh,
Right,
now it's
yeah.
too far. Go. But it's like nowadays, it's like you're too, like, even if you take your kids, you're like, no, you're not old enough now. And now you're too old. You
Yeah.
crossed that bridge. There was never a line next. There was never a spot where that was going to work.
Yeah, and we weren't old enough in the book like to cover even drinking back then. You know, I tell my kids that, you know, there were times where we, you know, pulled out of the back parking lot of the high school, our truck just weighed down with cases of beer, got pulled over, you know, they confiscated our beer or they poured it all out and they let us go.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, I mean, and no one was, you know, was shit faced or anything. I'm pretty sure they would not have let us go if our driver was. But still, nowadays, you're going, yeah, your parents are getting a phone call.
Right. Somebody's getting a phone call. Like they would leave with the beer. And you're like, I know that beer's not getting dumped out.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, someone's having a cookout this weekend because there were 6 cases of beer and it was actually decent stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, just a different time. So I was glad to kind of capture that in Boogeyman, and I'd like to go back there at some point. I tend to get a little too nostalgic at times. I've said it many times. Chasing the Boogeyman wrote itself. It did not. It's probably the easiest book I've ever written.
Yeah,
especially those sections. And that's kind of why in Becoming the Boogeyman, I fictionalized the idea that that those sections were so popular in Chasing the Boogeyman that I was coming back and writing this glimpse into my youth called, what was it, Edgewood, Looking Back. And that way it gave me the excuse to kind of go back and talk about us playing football and peeking in windows and the whole thing. And you know, my friends, including the one who had epilepsy, and as good friends only can, you know, we schooled ourselves, we educated ourselves on how to help them if anything went wrong. And then as soon as we all knew that stuff, we proceeded to, like, you know, mercilessly make fun of them, call him Epi. And, you know, my editors, are you sure you want this in there? And I'm like, yes, that was his nickname, Epi and Spaz. And to this day, you know, we still see him. He came to a poker game a couple of years ago. This guy will never change. Bob Iring. He came, his t-shirt was ripped, and we noticed his elbows were all dirty. And we're like, what the hell, man? You didn't take a shower? What were you doing? He's like, I was playing tackle football. You know, he's in his before poker, in his 50s. And it's like, I mean, he's tiny. He's our little tiny epileptic friends with honestly the Coke bottle glasses. He you know, cleaned himself up and got married and stuff in later days. But back then he was kind of, you know, Bob was just, I mean, he was something. He stopped brushing his teeth once for a year, just on it, you know. I think I wrote about that. I'm like, no one knows why. I think he knew why he did it, but it was disgusting. He knew it was disgusting. And then, you know, he turned into a normal young man and got, like I said, got married and all that stuff. But he was still the guy who showed up at poker, you know, all filthy and smelly with his t-shirt torn, and said he just came from tackle football. Where if any of us, if we had like decided at that moment to go out and play tackle football, it would have lasted 5 minutes. We'd all been hurt. But
everyone needs ice packs. Yeah,
or worse. And, you know, I could see us needing ambulances, you know, torn ACLs and the whole thing. But yeah, he's the smallest of the group, but he was still out. I can't even remember. I'm sure we did, but I don't even know who he was playing with. Was he playing with a bunch of teenagers, or were there a bunch of like-minded, you know?
I can't imagine there's that crew of 50-year-olds all looking to go out, and maybe there are. I guess maybe there are. Maybe there are. I'd be like, yeah, I have a concussion. That definitely. I'd be so nervous now as a.
I feel like we know a few people. That's good that you can have a group of friends, though, that, you know, you can show up looking like a real dirtball, and it's cool.
Oh, right. Yeah. None of our friends. Yeah. I mean, if someone would have shown up with like a sweater with a collared shirt underneath it or something, we would have like ripped a sweater or something.
Sure.
That's the nice thing about knowing guys since literally, you know, elementary school. It's like, hey, anything goes. And our poker games are always, you know, pretty legendary, because it's like, there's one thing you can't do to a guy you've known since pretty much birth, is bluff them. They would rather, you know, give you the registration to their car, the deed to their car, than be bluffed out of $4.50. So it's like, when those rare times we bring in newbies, we're like, don't even bother trying, because one of us will do it. One of us will do it just to stand up for the group.
Right.
You know, but yeah, so it's always fun.
Well, that's cool. So can I ask you a question about Boogeyman? Let's jump back even further, though. What was the first book you wrote? Boogeyman was the biggest book you've written so far, right? In terms of popularity, sales?
No, the biggest solo. Yeah. It's interesting because I you know, before Gwendy came along, I had, I'd kind of been using, and it wasn't an excuse. It was legit, but at the same time, it was still BS. It was still an excuse that I was so busy with the business, and for a while, for like a 10-year period, writing movies and doing that stuff, that I never really sat down and wrote a novel. It was always short story collections. I had 4 or 5 different short story collections. Probably 100 stories published out there, and they were reviewed well and they sold well for specialty press levels and all that. And there was always interest from outside publishers in a novel. I think it wasn't until, I say Gwendy, but it was probably, I wrote a couple novellas. One was called A Long December, that kind of showed me, hey, it's a 30,000 words, so double it and it's a novel. So that kind of got my feet out, under me a little bit as far as that. In earlier days, I think I was intimidated. I think I was intimidated that I had to, instead of writing my kind of story, that small campfire story that I've referred to a few times, I thought I had to write something bigger and twistier and more elaborate. And I think that, intimidation factor was there, even though I had been editing and writing all these years.
Yeah.
And I wrote a couple novellas. Like I said, A Long December got a lot of good press. And then when Steve came along and asked me to finish Gwendy, in that just blur of course, I'm happy to do it. And then the aftermath of what the hell have I done? It gave me a lot of confidence. So then, Gwendy's Magic Feather was kind of considered a short novel. And then came Boogeyman. And with Boogeyman, it really was a case of, once I had the idea, I looked up 3 months later and was like, wow, I've written a book. I have no idea if it's any good. I'm going to send this to my agent. And I had to preface it with her by saying, this isn't the book that I told you I was going to write. It's something completely different, but it's finished. And guess what? I'm the main character. And she was like, oh, interesting.
Like, oh, geez, here we go.
And there's a lot of questionable behavior from kids in there.
Yeah.
I have a question on that, actually, as a fan. So I read in Chasing the Boogeyman, you reference how you paid, I think, $9 for a magic feather.
That's true.
As a kid. Was that a little bit of the sort of impetus for Gwendy's magic feather, or did that carry through?
Oh yeah, completely carried through. In some ways, it was solely so I could go back to my sisters and be like, aha, I told you it was real, because
it had its own sorts of magic.
Yeah. There you go. I was like, all these years later, I was right and you were wrong. Yeah, they love that story, and they love just that moment of them coming outside and, me saving my money up all summer, my change, and then going to Buffalo with the family, literally right out of like the Wonder Years. There's a squabbling in the back seat. We get there, and within 10 minutes, I've given up like 80% of my nest egg for this magic feather to these, tough looking neighborhood kids. And my sisters are like, what an idiot. My dad's like, I can get your money back. And I'm like, don't you dare. So yeah, that's where the magic feather came from, for sure.
That's cool. A few years ago, I think it was when I first contacted you, right after I'd read the first Boogeyman, I saw Ken over the summer and I said, hey, I think I just read a book you'd like. And he was like, oh, I just read a book I think you would like too.
Yeah.
He had just read Gwendy.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
I was like, he's like, I just talked. He's like, it's so weird, because I actually reached out to him. I was like, that's so weird. I mean, it was literally like within 2 days.
Oh, that makes me happy. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. I've been thrown into to the whole book thing. I mean, and I'm so glad, because it was always my plan to write books. And like I said, that turned into writing stories and doing publishing. And for years, when I really didn't have a staff, or it was just one other person, it sucked up all my time, and it was what was paying the bills. So I kind of had to stick with that. But I also know with, I like embrace the grind. So I know that back then, even though I was putting in so much time, it was an excuse, because I could have whipped out 2 pages a day and had, a novel at the end of the year. There's no question.
Sure.
There were other things, and fortunately, between writing the novellas and then Gwendy coming when it did, it kind of just gave me that confidence to leap forward. And then I look back, when I finished Memorials, I'm just like, holy crap, I've written like 5 novels, and they were all in my 50s, and hopefully I live for a while and I can write 3 times that amount or something. But I'm getting ready to start the next one, and I have another one due, at the end of the year that I'm about to sign a contract for. So it's just like, wow, it happened quick. And it's a story, that I eventually want to kind of get out there, because I wanted to give encouragement to other old crusty, fossils like me in my 50s to get out there and do it. And realize that, hey, I mean, obviously I have the advantage of 30 plus years in the business, but again, it just shows you that if you've always wanted to do it, it's definitely not too late. So
No, I agree with you. It's a big hurdle to get over, the writing. I mean, it's daunting, especially for people who like prolifically turn out work and you just looking at the first page, you think, how the hell am I going to fill all of this? But yeah, once you complete, I mean, I got into script writing a few years ago, and I remember the first time that we reached the end of like 110 pages. I was like, oh, this wasn't so
Yeah.
bad. Like, I could do 20 more of these.
That's the key right there, is just get, I get asked all the time, and I've done writing seminars and conferences and all that stuff. And my advice is so simplistic compared to what it used to be. It's just get, and again, I always preface it. I'm like, look, you're probably like waiting for the punchline, but there is none. My biggest piece of advice is get to the end, write the end. Because once you have the 110 page script or the 310 page manuscript, you can go back and make it better.
Right.
Whether it's through outside help or just training yourself, or taking your time and doing numerous rewrites and attacking.
You know where you're going.
Yeah. I mean, but you can't do that unless you have those pages sitting in front of you. And that's the lesson that I've learned. And it's like, some of my books have been in the rewrite phase, even working with Simon Schuster, have been very quick. Not a lot of material there that needs to be addressed. And then there's a book like Memorials where, I've probably had 5 or 6 weeks of rewrites and expanding. And that was one cool thing, is at least with that book, is when I turned it in, it was already long. It was already like 125,000 words. So I kind of thought, I wonder if they're going to make me cut back. And instead, Ed Schlesinger, who's an awesome editor, and I'm thrilled to be working with him. His ideas were more about expanding and elaborating. And I love that. I kind of had the freedom to just go and tell my story the way I wanted to tell it.
So where'd you start with all this? You said you wanted to be a writer originally. How much of the boogeyman was actually true? Like, did you get into journalism?
Yeah. I mean, the stuff I wrote about, like writing war stories and monster stories when I was like, before I was 10, and trying to sell them to my friends, and them, going, I'm not giving you a dime for that. I'm not giving you a nickel for that. And because I came to your magic show, I was like the ultimate child entrepreneur. And I think I wrote about that in there, but I still have friends who are seeking a refund for my one and only magic show that I gave in the breezeway of my, because it was so bad. They're like, we saw everything, not a single trick, and you owe me a dime. And I'm just like, I'll buy you a beer, but I'm not giving you your dime back.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
You were entertained. For that time period.
That's right.
But I would like, it was time to clean my room. So here was all this broken toys and shit that I was going to throw out. And I'm like, I'm going to go have a carnival in my side yard, and I'm going to make some bank because the neighbors' kids are younger. And I can still remember, well, just go get some green stuff. Your mom will give it to you, or get it from her purse. I was like, I was like this huckster at age, 12 or 10. But yeah, I wrote those stories, and my mom was like my audience, and then that turned into like telling my friends stories, and I ultimately ended up getting a degree in journalism and doing a lot of newspaper stuff in college, and then that turned into writing fiction again. I kind of returned home once I read It by Stephen King. I was like, it reminded me. I'm like, this is the stuff I like, and this is what I want to do. So I discovered the whole underground of small press magazines, and back then there were just dozens of them. And then you had the big ones like the Twilight Zone and Night Cry, and Fangoria would publish fiction once in a while. And it was just, it was the heyday. So I had tons of places to submit to, and sold quite a few really bad stories. And you flip a coin whether you would get your contrib copy, and it would either be pretty nice, and you're like, hey, showing my friends and family, or it was just ridiculously amateur. And that's what you want to start Cemetery Dance is the ones that I would pull out of the envelope and stuff in a drawer because I was embarrassed to show anyone. I'm like, I can do better than that.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how do you decide that you're like, you know what, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to be the publisher for this thing. I'm going to do it. And do you think the journalism kind of background helped you with that a little bit too?
Kind of. It was, for me, journalism was so formulistic, and already writing stories and selling them helped me in journalism. Because believe it or not, it kind of impressed some of the journalism, professors. And I was not a great student. Like, I had a rule. I did not go to class in the rain. So there were times when I literally turned the car around because the sky opened up. And my poor, she was my girlfriend then, but she's my wife now, still long suffering. She would just shake her head. She's like, this is why it took you 5.5 years to graduate. And I'm like, yeah, well, take a semester off. She's like, oh yeah, 6 years.
They're like, thank you, Dr. Chizmar.
Yes. I'm like, and I started a business, and I played lacrosse on scholarship for 3 of those years. And, so I was busy with other things, but it's like once lacrosse stopped, I became, a better student. Yeah, I always just say I was young and dumb. I saw these and I'm like, I can do better than that. And I had no idea how.
Right.
Just kind of jumped in, and the stories that came out of there, those first few issues and the trials, and my roommate drawing the art right on the actual design pages, not even having them like dropped in, or this scanners weren't like around, because even the newspapers, I was sports editor for my college newspaper, and even that was done with they'd print out the columns and they'd wax them, and they'd actually manually lay down the page.
Yeah.
So this was
Oh my
before,
gosh.
and like the first issue was like the very beginning of desktop publishing. That was like the first page maker that came out, and it cost like $600. And I spent the first like 3 or 4 years of running Cemetery and Dance and dreaming the ultimate dream, like golden light on it and sparks coming off it, was to be able to afford a laser printer back then. Like $4,000, $3,500, and until HP came out with something more affordable. But no, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, none whatsoever. So everything was trial by error, and I was still selling my own stuff to other places, and it just kind of grew from there. I mean, that's why I always tell people, I'm like, I'm great to come to for advice, because any mistake that could possibly be made, I made it many times.
That's great. Yeah. So Cemetery Dance, was the point of it was just to publish your work, or were you looking for others?
Yeah, no, I never published my own work in it. That was like, to this day, I've never, almost 80 issues. I've never put anything other than the editorial in the beginning. I've never put an essay. Oh. I've never been interviewed for the magazine, and I've never published a story in there, because I just always thought, there were plenty of other places to sell to, and I never wanted to kind of have that. I just always felt like, well, I'm not going to take up, because I was buying really good stuff from both new and established writers.
Yeah.
I didn't have a co-editor to say, hey, this story's really good, you should save this one for CD. But even then, I probably would have refused. So I'm glad that I never did that. It took me a while just to say, hey, I'm going to publish my own books, but that's because I realized, hey, we can actually, make some money with that. So keep it in the business.
So were you like stuffing envelopes in the basement, or how were those first days? Like, what was that looking like?
Literally wake up. And it's funny you said that, because there were there was no internet. So all of my marketing was, you had two choices. You had direct mail or you had display ads. One of the reasons for our early success is we had a half-page ad in an issue of Twilight Zone magazine. We rated my wife's girlfriend at the time. We used like $600 from her student loan for school to pay this ad, which is why we've always joked, we're like, man,
plus it paid off if she's still with you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm thank God she's still with me, because it's been mentioned in print and interviews. And I'm like, you would have definitely, done well in the divorce.
It's all from this.
Your $600 was integral in the building of our business.
Yes.
What had happened is that ended up being the final issue of Twilight Zone. So instead of it disappearing from all the newsstands after 2 months for the new issue, it just, anything that was unsold stuck around. So we continued to sell from that ad for like a year. But the point is there weren't many places other than other small press magazines to do display advertising. So direct mail became the big thing. We would buy mailing lists from, any bookseller, any online bookseller we could, other magazines. Sure. David was the Horror Show was a big one, because it was a magazine that we were trying to emulate in many ways. So yes, folding flyers, stuffing envelopes, and putting stamps on before they were adhesive and you actually had to wet them was a huge part of my life. I mean, hours every day.
Yeah.
Then you would send them out, and you would just hope and pray that a lot of them would return with checks. So the building of the business was all trial and error. It was a lot of that grunge work, and it was me. My girlfriend, when she was in physical therapy school, so she had no time, but she helped when she could. My dad, just like I wrote about in Chasing the Boogeyman, my dad helped sometimes, and that was awesome. But most of the time, I watched a lot of Andy Griffith's show, and I could tell you like the half an hour blocks of what was on the TV, because I was in front of a coffee table folding flyers for so many hours.
My first job, so I'm still working actually, but at Renegade. When I first started, we had like a sort of training magazine that we put out. But once a month was shipping day, and everybody gathered in the room, and everybody sat around, and you just sat there and counted flyers. I mean, the owner of the company, everybody, we're all sitting on the floor, counting out. Right, you get an envelope. We need to put 35 in this one. Okay, shipped and get gone. So that's what I was picturing, like working on your own, publishing your own magazine.
Some of the early people who got like some of the early stores who got 10, 20 copies of the magazine, or even when we started publishing books 3 years later, Some of those boxes came from dumpsters. I hate to tell them now because it's like the idea of us being able to afford to buy new boxes was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, my parents saved boxes that they got that they found at the grocery store and stuff. So those were pretty clean, but some of them were questionable for packing paper. I can remember because I lived in an apartment at the time. I can remember waiting until like 10 at night to go to the paper boxes around, my area.
The newspaper boxes?
Quarter, yep, or whatever it was. And then I would take whatever was left because I'm like, no one is going to buy them. No one's buying them at 10 at night. I was a heathen, but it's the only way it worked.
Well, it kind of fits the hustler kind of kid who's selling his broken toys. It's like, just keep grinding, just keep finding a way. Just keep.
That's all we could do, And we had a hill out by the apartment. We nicknamed it Misery Hill because anytime my wife would come back from PT school, if I was sitting on that hill, she knew that like the mailing we did a week earlier had bombed, and I'd gone to the PO box, and there was like two, checks or something, and it was like, oh boy, we're gonna have to, she would come out and sit on Misery Hill with me, and then we'd be like, all right, let's just go back. What's next? But yeah, it was. I loved what I was doing, so it made that grind sustainable. But I still tell people all the time, I'm like, look, those first 10 years, the worst time of year was income tax time because we would like compute, and I'd be like, I'm working for 16 cents an hour. That's all we made. But eventually, the books became more successful and the magazines started becoming, more self-sustaining, and it worked out. Thank God, knock on wood.
Yeah. So what was that turning point when you were able to like alleviate some of that stress and time and focus on other things like actually writing for yourself and not just stuffing envelopes?
You know what? It's funny because I still do. I still do a lot of promoting for my books. And I'm still there, like with postcards slapping on the labels, and people are like, "You don't pay someone to do that?" And I'm like, "Look, man, it's already costing me enough money out of my pocket to do this." And Simon & Schuster does great promotions; they do a lot, and I'm very fortunate that I'm one of the authors that they do, put an advertising budget behind. But it's hard to shake that, and that's something that I'm glad. Like for instance, Billy, I'm glad he's seen it, and Noah too, where it's like, just because all of a sudden you're getting big checks to write a book, it's still the way I know. It's still the path I know for success. Yeah. So
signing all those stickers makes more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's still times where I look around and I'm like, and I'll look at Kara, and she's like, she's on the other end of it now. She's retired from her physical therapy firm and all that. So she'll help me. But there's still times I look up and I'm like, what the hell am I, 10,000 book plates, same thing. It's like, what the hell am I doing? But it's like, what?
Who agreed to this?
Not only did I agree to it, it was my dumbass idea. But and that's the way I've explained it. Like I did a podcast with what's the huge mystery crime bookstore out in Denver. The couple times I've appeared, Michael Creed has been the go-between and asked a lot of the questions, and they were just amazed at some of the stuff that I do, and they're like shaking their head, and they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, it's how I grew my business as a publishing company. So it's really the only way I know, once the writing is done, to grow my business as a writer.
I'm sure it's also hard for you at this point, after you've been doing it for so long, to like let go of control of that.
Well, that was the case with the publishing business. Even after I had a staff and I had Brian Freeman and others came on board, I drove them crazy because I held on to so much of it. Yeah. And then flash forward 15 years, and I drove them crazy because I was like, I'm done. I don't want to have anything that you approve this. You look at the blue lines. I don't need to look at them. I don't need to decide what color end papers. That's all you guys.
Yeah.
So
learning to delegate.
Yeah. It took me a long time to get to that point.
Are you a antsy person? Are you somebody that just needs to always be kind of doing, like having a thing going or that?
My kids would laugh at that because I'm totally happy, like having that week where essentially I always tell them, like, some people want to have the contest for like who did the most steps that day. I'm like, I'm the opposite. I want to see who can do the least. Because I'm a tired soul, and summer comes, out there fishing, running around, doing my thing. But
that's great.
But yeah, no, I don't need to be that way. I can read a book, all day and kind of look up and realize, hey, it's time for the ball game, and watch the ball game and go to bed. I don't have days like that, and that's probably why I can. But no, it's interesting. I'll have to figure it out sometimes. Part of it was when Chasing came out and it was just my name on that book. When your name's on a book with Stephen King, you're going to do pretty well.
Sure.
And actually I found that out, I should know better because I've been publishing the guy for decades, but with Button Box. I really, people kind of look at me kind of cross-eyed that they don't know if I'm telling the truth, but it's like, I was so overwhelmed by just the process of us writing that together that when we finished, we kind of looked at each other and we said, well, now what? And the only reason we decided to publish it as a little hardcover was because Cemetery Dance had done Blockade Billy as a little hardcover and had done really well. And it had turned into an actual Scribner release where they took over the rights from us and they did, 100,000 or whatever more hardcovers of this little novella. So we decided, hey, why not do that again? Except this time we'll just keep it through Cemetery Dance. Even then, I really honestly never thought about like a bestseller list or how big of a undertaking this was. I knew we were going to, I knew from Blockade Billy where we had to handle distributors coming to us and saying, yeah, we want more copies, but, we want 20,000 and us having to say, no, we can't do that. Our contract was only for X amount of copies. There were no restrictions with Button Box. So even though I was working on the editorial publishing side of it, I never really gave it thought from the writing side. And I had no idea it was going to, number one, that it was going to be this smash hit, even though it had King's name on it. There was a moment where I bought a copy of USA Today and I don't buy the paper. So there had to be a reason I was buying it. It was not because of books. I'm thinking it had something to do with
before 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. I bought it from 7-Eleven. My lucky 7-Eleven, I call it.
Were you planning on stuffing boxes with it?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually in a pile somewhere saved. But as I'm walking out, I flip it over and I look below the fold. And on the very left corner, there's a column, a display column. It says the 5 most popular books in the U.S. this week. And Gwendy was like 4. And I'm like, what the?
Holy shit.
That's the first thought I had, that it was going to be this publishing, success. And again, I should have known better because I was, we did Blockade Billy. Most of the books we did are limited. So that's a foreign world. But Blockade Billy opened that up for us. But I just wasn't thinking of it because I was so immersed in just, hey, I got to write with my my hero, Stephen King, and my friend, Stephen King. And isn't that awesome? And my publishing company is going to do well financially. But I never thought of it from the writing standpoint. So,
wow.
Yeah, I don't remember the point of telling you that story, but
I got 2 questions about it though. One was, how in the world did that relationship develop? And 2, you can get to in a second. I'm curious at what the writing process is like between you two. Sure. I've never written anything with anyone else.
Yeah. The relationship started right from the very beginning when I was in college, and the first issue came out. The first issue came out when I was in college. The second issue came out right after I graduated.
Yeah.
I sent every issue of the magazine up to his office in Maine.
Okay.
I'm sure with long, embarrassingly, embarrassing letters. You're my hero. You're the reason I'm doing this. And then when I started, actually, it was probably the second or third year I wrote up and I asked if he enjoyed it, would he be willing to provide us with a promotional blurb? And boom, we got one right back. I was like, holy. And then in year 3 in 91, his agent, Chuck Varell, who's in New York, he sent me an original story called Chattery Teeth of Steve's. The story behind that is that it came from Chuck Varell in New York, who I knew nothing about. It sat in my slush pile for 3 months. Until I got a postcard from Chuck Varell, this time identifying himself as Stephen King's agent and saying, Steve, I sent you the story for Steve and he's a big fan and he would really love to see it in Cemetery Dance if you like it. So I'll never forget it. I went in, I had taken off one of the closets in the extra bedroom, which was my office in the apartment. And on the floor was about 2 3-foot stacks of submissions. So I'm tearing through it, throwing over my shoulder, looking for this manuscript. Found it, read it, loved it, called his agent, told him, oh my God, I loved it so much, blah, blah, blah. And then Karen, my wife and I, we went and celebrated by going to the first baseball game at Camden Yards.
Oh, nice. Wow.
I'll never forget it.
What a good memory.
It wasn't opening day. It was the day before or 2 days before. It was that big exhibition, the first game ever played there.
Yeah.
Came back from the game on cloud 9, and there's my voicemail, my answering machine is beeping, and there's a message from Stephen King saying how happy he is that I liked the story, and Chuck told him that it was going to, come out later that year, and just how happy he was that I liked it. Now I still have that.
Holy moly! It
was a micro cassette.
Yeah, that's good one to keep.
Yeah. But that's kind of how the relationship started. And then over the years, there were a couple stories for anthologies like reprints. And then right right around 2000, 2001, his secretary sent me the manuscript for From a Buick 8 and just said Steve was wondering if he wanted to do a limited edition.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the book relationship. And then over the next decade, there were like another 6, 7 more books.
So you published a limited edition of that starting?
Yeah. Yeah. That was the first King book that we did, was From a Buick 8.
How many copies?
I think it was 750 limited, 52 lettered, and like 1,500 gift editions. And,
Okay.
you know, with a book like that, your profit is, you know, more than I probably made the previous 3-4 years in total.
Combined.
Really?
But again, you know, I'm in such a place where it's still like, even though it was like, you know, a relief, it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It was still like, I just published a book from Stephen King. That
Yeah.
overwhelmed everything. And somewhere in there, I got an invitation to come to the 25th anniversary celebration of the publication of Carrie, which tells you how long I've been doing this, because now it's 50 years.
Yeah,
Right.
that just came out, right?
Yeah. But that was the first time I met Steve face to face. Is Kara and I we had actually had a baby. We had Billy probably a few months prior. So it's always memorable for us because it was the first time we left him.
Oh, wow.
With family. And we went to New York. It was the party was at Tavern on the Green. And we went, you know, I got to meet Steve and yeah, it was just a cool night. And then after that, you know, it was just a business relationship for like another 5-10 years. And then somewhere in there, you know, we started emailing and texting about non-business stuff, just like about baseball and our dogs and family, and a lot about movies and books. And yeah, I mean, so, you know, at some point I kind of looked up and I'm like, I text with Stephen King every day, pretty much.
Are we best friends?
Bizarre.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so, and I got to go hang out with him down in Florida. We saw some baseball games and, you know, took me out to the house and things like that, and invited me to some movie premieres. So yeah,
Really cool.
and he's such a normal guy. You know, I got over the Saturday Night Live Chris Farley thing with Paul McCartney, where he's just like, remember when you were with the Beatles?
That was really great.
I was actually, by the time I was actually hanging out with him, I was completely over. You know, there was no, hey, remember when you wrote Carrie? Remember Salem Plot?
Right.
You know, so none of that stuff happened. It all fortunately happened previously in print, in like letters, which I'm sure he threw right away.
That Pennywise.
Anytime I see clips of that, Chris Farley doing that, I'm just like, oh Jesus, that could have so been me.
And we joke about that a lot.
That's how the relationship developed. It was just like this very natural thing. And I think people have asked me, kind of probing further, they're like, well, why do you think it? And my answer has always been, I know Steve, because he had been part of my journey from day one. He knew I was doing this for the right reasons. Yeah.
And you big timed him on his first submission too. So, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, I did. I played hard to get. But I know there's that respect factor on that, you know, I stuck through all those lean years. But yeah, that's the relationship. And it's just a cool thing to look back on.
So how do you split writing duties? I mean, I assume you write 20 pages and he writes 4,000 in a week.
No, you know what? He with Gwindy, because he had already had those first like 25 or 30 pages.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. Is he, you know, we started emailing one day about collaborations, and he's like, hey, I have this thing I never finished, you know, that I started over the summer, if you want to look at it. And I just thought he was being cool and saying, hey, if you want to read it, because that is one of the perks. A lot of times you get advanced manuscripts to read.
Sure.
But when he sent it, he said, the email said something to the effect of, you know, do with it as you wish. And I remember kind of sitting back from my computer and writing back, what do you mean? You want me to finish it?
I was going to say, what does that mean? Hold on a second. What is this?
It completely was my reaction. And he's like, yeah, no, I didn't tell anyone. It was on a Friday. And I specifically remember once he said, yeah, if you think you can, I held that close to me for like 72 hours because I couldn't wrap my head around it. Right. And then I also couldn't wrap my head around how stupid I was to say, hell yes, I'll try. I'll do this, you know, because like, what am I thinking? And I still
as soon as you say that to somebody too, now you're committed, because you can't say no, right? But it's like as soon as the cat's out of the bag, you're like, well, now I'm in.
What's funny is he gave me that back out a couple days later, and I don't know whether he was just because I didn't talk about it a lot,
just testing you.
But I think he probably sensed it, because I do know that a couple days later, whether it was an email or a text or whatever, it was just like, hey, Rich, there really is no pressure. You know, go for it if you want to, but don't if you don't. And then, of course, I'm thinking, does that mean he doesn't really want me to try it? And I'm like,
challenge.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
that's awesome.
I finally did tell Kara, and Billy was old enough to understand by then, and they were like, "Holy crap!" And I'm just like, "Yeah, holy crap! I have no idea how I'm going to do it." And I whipped out like 10,000 words in a couple days, and it just all just flowed. I was right there in Castle Rock, and I remember I was finished, and I'm thinking, how many times am I going to edit this before I send it to him? And I thought, you know what? None. I'm going to hit send, because if I don't, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
So I hit send. Fortunately, he liked what I had done. He said, I'd probably take a couple weeks before I can, get on and do my part. And then he did his part, and then he sent it back. My original ending, believe it or not, was too dark for Stephen King.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember thinking, what kind of freak am I where I've got Steve King saying, "Oh, this is a little dark, Rich. I think Wendy deserves better," were his exact words.
Yeah.
So I let him do a first pass of the ending. And again, I think being generous, he's like, "Rich, I did it, but it's really bare here and here. So I need you to," and I think it was his way of saying, "I want your fingers in the ending too. I want your,"
yeah.
I look back now and I'm like, yeah, he was generous in several terms there, but, so that's how it happened. Then when it came time for the last one, we 50-page sections. The last book was very much Steve's idea. He thought of it, about being up on the shuttle and Gwendy's mind, having this debilitating, illness. And so I just, I was overwhelmed, because I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I can't wait to play in the sandbox again. And then my second thought, does it have to be in space?
Yeah, like, what the hell do I know about
that? Is exactly what I said. I'm like, I know nothing about space. My dad, God bless him, he's been dead for 15 years. He knew everything about space.
Can it take place in Edgewood?
You know what? I'm surprised I didn't throw it in there. I'm the one who threw Derry in the third book.
Oh, did you? Nice.
I remember sending him my 50-page section and going, all right, he's either going to like rub his hands together and say, "This is awesome and let's go," or he's going to be like, "Rich, maybe you should take another couple of weeks and do 50 new pages." Fortunately, it was the first one. He loved it, and he ended on it and made it better.
That's got to be tricky too. You're essentially playing in his sandbox and trying not to step on his toes. Like, how do you write something that he has already written?
Well, the bigger example of that, you're 100% right, was the second book, Magic Feather. I thought, and again, I should be lying about this, but I've told the story too many times now. But I should be lying to make myself look smart and be like, yeah, Steve really just trusted me and wanted me to go off on my own.
Yeah.
I thought I'm the one who went to him, and I didn't say, "Hey, let's do this again." I just had a dream. So I woke up one morning early, which is unusual enough, and I sent him an email right away, still blurry eyed, and I'm like, I said, "I think I know what Gwendy's been doing since the end of the first book." And I'm like the least political person,
Yeah.
But I think she's been a senator. I said, I think she went into government because there's that good side of her. And at the same time as she's still being a writer, he loved the idea. As you know, Steve is political. So he loved the idea. And he said, "I'm going to be busy." This is almost verbatim. He said, "I'm going to be busy for the foreseeable future with Holly Gibney," because he was writing, those books. And he said, "But you need to write it." So again, in my ultimate wisdom, I took that as, "Rich, you write the first draft. And by the time you're done, I'll be finished with Holly. And then I'll go in and do my pass and make you look really good. And we'll go from there." Then we'll decide what we need to do to finish it. 100% what I thought. So I sat down like a dumbass. I bring Castle Rock back. There's a statue in the town square that is in tribute to the restoration of the town. I bring back Sheriff Bannerman from Cujo, and
I didn't even make that connection.
Something else. So you talk about playing in a sandbox. I never would have had the balls to do all that if I had known I was flying solo. But when I sent Steve the manuscript and said, "Hey, I'm finished," he read it. He really liked it. Said, "I got a couple suggestions if you want me to edit it." I said, "No, I want you to rewrite it and do your part." He's like, "No, Rich, this is yours." He goes, "You don't need me. You got the story." And I was just crushed. I was just like, "Oh my God." I mean, I remember telling him I would not have done all this if I had known. He's like, "I'm glad you did." And he did give me a nice edit. And he wrote the introduction, I think, to prevent, the constant readers from like wanting to lynch me.
Yeah.
Right. Who's this Chizmar guy?
Your reaction is so mixed though, right? So that you're like, hold on a second. Like, because you should be like honored, right? Hey, you did it. You did great.
That's the peak of the mountain. Jeez.
But you have this like, I don't know. You're like, I thought you were going to.
The being honored part, honestly, was weeks away. It was weeks away because I just was like, oh, what have I done?
Nerves.
The introduction helped because, like I said, I did tell him after the fact. I said, I'm sure he knew ahead of time, but I'm like, this is gonna prevent all the scores of people from being like, who the hell is Chizmar to be writing about Castle Rock and all that? Because now I got Steve's blessing, and he's saying how much he enjoyed it and that he kind of fell in love with the character all over again, and that's what led to the third book. So very fortunate. But yeah, again, you talk about playing in a sandbox. I was playing all by myself and had no idea.
That'd be pretty fun though.
Nobody was coming to help.
Yeah.
Until I got called in for dinner. So that's what made the third book extra fun, is when I still remember it was a Sunday night, and I was getting, all of a sudden I started getting texts kind of fast and furious, and they were long texts, which is not usually like us. We're usually like, a couple of words back and forth. And he said, I have an idea. What do you think? And we started going back and forth, kind of riffing on the idea. And at the end, I just said, Steve, tell me you're going to write this one with me. It's just not me. Or is it just all you? And then I thought, oh, no, is it just all you? And he's like, no, absolutely. And you block off this fall, right, we'll write it together. And he said, I think it should be a full-length novel. And I was just like, at that point, I was happy. I was just like, yes.
We get to do it all again, right? You're like,
screw space, So, but we did 50-page sections, and then his 50-page section just happened to end like maybe 10 pages short of the very end of the book, which again, I think was Steve's way of saying, put your thumbprint on the end. So I wrote the very ending, and that was that. That's the thing. There's a lot of space, just like with the Dark Tower, where he went back and he wrote some stories that took place.
Side stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's actually, as a fan, I was going to ask if there's any like Richard Ferris sort of plans in there. He's such a sort of a strange character that pops in that I feel like it's just begging to have some sort of like, there and on the periphery story. So
yeah, I think that could happen. I mean, there's some nice gaps in between those stories, and that's regarding Gwendy. When you start talking about Richard Ferris,
yeah, true. That's a whole other side of things.
So I hope so. I mean, I know he enjoyed it. I still have a bunch of texts on my phone. I could never go back that far and find them, where you can kind of see how much fun we were having with the process. And I do know that I did revert back to my early 20 days at some point in a text, and was like, this is what a collaboration should be like. We're having so much fun. And I'm just like, I realized after I said,
I'm a nerd.
What have I done? But again, he wrote back and he was right there with me, because it was just one of those days where we were kind of cackling, back and forth, and just, like I said,
sorry, I got caught up.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I was like, excuse me,
is this the best thing?
That wasn't me. That was Billy.
It's a lot of emotion.
It's funny you said about that, about like, so if you want to make a living, getting into the sort of horror genre and all that stuff. And then, so now your son's a writer.
Yeah.
So
how old's he?
How did that come about? Or how
he just turned 25. He's just always been the creative one too. I mean, That's cool. Billy's my oldest. Noah's my youngest. Noah's at University of Virginia right now. They both, grew up very athletic. They played multiple sports, and they both played college lacrosse. Billy was the creative one. Noah was more of the math whiz and all that stuff, taken after his mom. But Billy when I used to tell Billy stories when he was young, he would like edit me right there, live action. He'd be like, no, Dad, he's not a king. He's a prince. And the reason he's a prince, and he would go on, and I'd be like, okay, that works. And he'd be like, no, Dad, it's not a dragon this time. It's a fire creature, or it's this. And I'm like, okay. And that just blossomed more and more as he got into like, video games and like magic cards and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. And he would draw his own comics, and he would always get, reinforcement from the teachers for writing like stories, a lot of them pretty twisted.
That's got to be great. Like,
yeah. So he sold a couple short stories early on to places.
Damn, good for him.
16 or 17. And then just, he was always writing. He went to Colby College up in Maine, which is like an hour from Bangor.
Convenient. I know people up there.
Yeah.
Uncle Steve.
He got to go with me to several of those movie premieres up there, and he got to meet Steve.
Cool.
So he's just inspired by the whole world. He grew up around books. When I look at his interviews now, he's always talking about, to go from his room to the bathroom, he had to pass like, 500 paperbacks that were in this one bookshelf, and all these scary images every day. And so, it just, and COVID, he came home, the colleges sent him home. So he came home, and he sat out by the pond in our yard every day. And by the end of that semester, he had his first novel.
That's cool. So as a dad, were you like, yeah, this is great? Or this is like, yeah, you might want to get a degree in something too, and then do this? Or what was your kind of
just very much do what's going to make you happy, but know ahead of time. The cool thing is he's heard all the stories about the dirty boxes from the dumpsters.
Oh, true. He's probably seen things.
Right. Yeah. He's heard enough and realized that, where that is. But he was doing it because he just loved it and he couldn't help it. So I was like, you keep going on that track. And yeah, you might have to get a real job too. And, or you could just work for CD because I'm always needing people. But the cool thing is yeah, I mean, we wrote the novella Widow's Point together, turned into a movie, not a very good movie, but he got to go out on the set and be in the movie. And
oh, that's cool.
It is cool. And he, so he got a lot of experience. And then he when he started his Patreon page, he went back and he rewrote the novel. And, he would post a section every month. And then when it was finished, he kind of realized, hey, this is good. So he was able to sell it, and it'll be out this summer in hardcover.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, and then I actually showed Widow's Point to my editor at Simon Schuster, and I said, we have an idea on where to take this next, if you guys be interested. And we were shocked. We got a contract offer.
Wow.
So that's actually what I'm starting next. Billy and I are writing it. I can't remember what the working title is. It's something funky, like, the complete Widow's Point, the complete story, or the complete saga, which I'm sure will get changed, but that's what we're writing next. So that'll be out from a big publisher, like in a year and a half or 2 years.
That's so cool. That's got to be really fulfilling.
It is, and it's just fun to watch his process and watch how excited he is as he went through the pre-production on his first book. He got to see the cover, he got to see sketches for this and that, and got to see the design pages. And then just literally like 2 weeks ago, Josh Mallerman, the Bird Box writer, the publisher asked him to write a foreword, and I told Billy, I said, look, if he accepted, then he's going to write something nice. I said, or he's going to say, I didn't like it, so I can't do it. I said, either way, just be prepared. But on Twitter, Josh tweeted one night, he's like, man, I'm sitting down and I'm reading, Billy Chizmar's first novel with an eye toward writing the foreword or something like that. And he says, and I'll be damned if this isn't one of the best debuts I've ever read. And I'm just like, oh, I saw it before anyone did. And I'm like, screenshot, send it to Billy, send it to send it to his mom, send it to his brother in Virginia. And I'm just like, holy shit.
That's so cool.
So I think that was for him was a breath of relief, and also it kind of stoked the excitement,
Yeah, that's huge feedback. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it was like, oh God, not only did he like it, but he really liked it. So yeah, it's cool. And I don't, after we do this book, I don't know, hopefully we'll do something again down the road, but I think he's also doubly excited about the first book is because it's all him. He's had plenty of success short stories by himself. But novella Widow's Point was with me. This next one's with me. I think it was cool for him. And he's a very different writer than me. And you'll see he's a much more intelligent writer. I'm the campfire guy. He's the one who, Josh hit, I read the foreword when it was finished, and Josh hit the nail on the head where it's almost like he writes in a much more musical, lush style. And there's something lyrical about a lot of his stuff, and very confident, where he'll just kind of go off on these little tangents for a moment, just for the right amount of time, and then bring you back into the story. Where there's none of that poetry with me, unless I'm talking about childhood, then I can kind of wax nostalgic. But otherwise, it's like I say, no one's going to have to pick up a thesaurus to read my books, and that's cool with me.
In a good way. Right.
Yeah. Because I don't want to get in the way, but Billy has a way of doing it without getting in the way, and I really admire it.
I do have a question real quick about screenplays, to go back to that.
That's where I was going to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were you going to ask about Roadhouse too?
You guys want to ask about Roadhouse? Yeah.
Wait. What?
You don't know this?
The sequel to Roadhouse, which I don't know yet, no, we're not talking the Jake Gyllenhaal remake thing.
I just watched that the other night.
I haven't seen it yet.
We're talking about straight to video, mister.
How did that come into your world? So he wrote the screenplay for the sequel to Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Wait, who was in it?
John Sheck, my buddy who I wrote it with. And actually, and like
Jake Busey, I think. Jake Busey.
I think so.
Plays the bad guy.
The older guy is a very popular actor, and I'm trying to think of his name. I mean, he's an acclaimed actor.
I'll have to look it up
now.
now.
His name,
Yeah,
but
right.
Yeah, John and I had written a short together and produced it, and like Jaimin Hansu from Gladiator was in it, and his wife at the time, Christina Applegate, and we had gotten the rights to From a Buick 8, so we were shopping that around town. We had written the script that Steve really liked, and John, because of his notoriety as an actor, had a lot of connections, and I actually had a few connections that were just bizarre that I had. Like, one of the biggest indie producers was one of our customers for years. I never knew he was an indie producer until I was like, hey, John, I got some meeting with, so-and-so. And he's like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, yeah. Like, how do you know? I'm like, oh, he's been buying books from me for 10 years.
Yeah.
So we came really close on Buick. But anyway, during all that time, the Buick script got us some attention as writers, and our agents started getting, some offers for rewrites. And Sony Screen Gems was one of the places they did a lot of horror films, so they were interested in us. And I'll never forget it. John's like, should I do this movie? And I was like, probably not. And he's like, this is how much they're offering me. And I'm probably yes.
Yes, you should.
So that's how Roadhouse 2 got on our radar. And then I'll never forget. Like 2 weeks later, he calls me and he's like, look, the script's a mess. They want to rewrite. Should we do it? And I'm like, probably not. And he's like, well, it's a 10-day job and this is how much they pay us. And I'm like, probably yes.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be an uncredited rewrite. So we were getting a big chunk of money, each of us, to 10 days work. And our names weren't going to go on it. So we had a blast. I mean, I still remember saying out loud, let's put a midget in the front. John's like, yes, I love the idea of a midget in the front. Well, it made the movie. There's a midget in the first scene.
All right. Okay.
Just all kitchen sink writing.
Well, what happened is then they came back. They loved it. They came back. We got paid. Everybody's happy. Another few weeks, John comes back and he's like, they want to credit us because they feel like it's an extra marketing tool for them to be the star,
Right.
Above the title. And I'm also one of the writers. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if we want. But in the end, I was just like, you know what? Who cares? This isn't my life. As long as you're cool with it, John, because it is your life. That's fine.
Right.
That's how it happened, man. And it went straight to like Redbox, and it's a ridiculous movie.
I feel like I have to go watch it now.
Oh,
I saw
really
the. I was like, I feel like somebody got this wrong on Wikipedia or something. And I was like, oh no, actually, that's legit. That's cool.
Well, what's funny is I finally made I grew up in big house of readers, and People magazine was always laying around somewhere, along with like National Geographic and all the intelligent magazines that my parents read. People was I had 3 older sisters, so and I've always said, I'm like, you know what, people should do an article on me for who's the schmuck writing with Stephen King. I've always told the Simon Schuster people, I'm like, why has no one approached us to because you get into these marketing talks, and I'm like, why has no one approached us with that whole angle of who is this nobody?
Right. Who is this guy?
You got to write 2 books with Stephen King.
I assume you won a contest.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's like I have pictures of Steve and a goat or something.
Right. All blackmail.
But no one ever did. And I'm just like, one People magazine article, that bad boy. And I'm like, my sales are going up. So a week ago, I get a link from John, and it's people.com or whatever. And it's an article about Roadhouse 2, the sequel, because of the remake. So popular.
Yeah.
So yeah, I finally got my name in People.
How about that?
Even if it is online and it's in relation to Roadhouse 2. But yeah, that's how it came about. That was our very first credited one. And even though after that we did indie films, and we did NBC, and we did Showtime and Masters of Horror and all that stuff, it's like that was our first credited Hollywood script. So
yeah. Are you doing a lot of originals?
You know what? I haven't done anything in a while. John and I we did it for about 10 years, and then he was like, well, I need to focus on acting again. And I'm like, it's time for me to start writing books. And we're still buddies, and we're still going to do some things. But even like with the Boogeyman books, the Gwendy books, I'm trying to think what else is in like various forms of pre-production, or, being not pre-production, but, going to the point where
developed. Yeah.
I mean, it's all in development. Yeah. Even then I've told my agent, I'm like, no, because I don't want to get sucked back into it. I just want to focus on novels. So yeah, I mean, Billy's a filmmaker, so he's done some stuff. We've done some short things together.
Yeah.
And I've told him, we have this one idea for something that we could do right here at home, and we could kind of do it as our leisure, kind of a footage type thing.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do a fake documentary for Boogeyman, but I have no time for that. So yeah,
I did love that, by the way.
Possibilities.
To bring it back to that too, I told Aaron I was totally suckered by the true crime nature of Chasing the Boogeyman. 100% hook, line, sinker.
Thank you. that was my idea, was to Blair Witch people. And Simon Schuster got scared of that, and that's why it says a novel on the front. It has that disclaimer which says this is essentially made up, but I'm like,
didn't read that.
Fortunately, between the true crime formatting and the photos and stuff, it's still for people. And I would love to. I've said it before. It's like, and if the right people would come along, I'd actually pay them to do it. I would love to have like a 3-part documentary, even a podcast, even like a true crime podcast, 3 episodes, like, 60-minute episodes or whatever.
Ken, how much time do you have?
Yeah. And they could interview me as the
No,
author.
no, I meant for this.
That's what I'm saying.
I would love to do that and to put it out there and play it straight.
Yeah.
And then bring in more attention on the books and stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Like War of the Worlds,
Yeah.
Oh, this is so in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
My senior project in college, I actually did something like that. There was like this fake documentary ghost story about chasing through the streets of Baltimore. And
Oh, cool.
I hand wrote half of it and then typed half of it up. And then I like got all these pictures and rubbed coffee all over them and like soaked them in tea and made them look old and shitty and put them in there. And yeah.
That's awesome.
That's fun. I like that genre.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So is it weird writing? So now you get to becoming the boogeyman, which, it feels a little bit more like you're, projecting sort of where you would go and things that didn't actually happen now more obviously.
Right.
But like, is it weird being the main character, like writing yourself?
So
yeah. So how do you, I don't know, how do you work that in? And also my wife would just kill me if I wrote
she hates it, Carrie.
novel. Oh my God.
All my friends love it. All my friends want bigger parts. The book,
That makes
because
sense.
the Boogeyman came out, a couple of them who are in the photos are like, I need a close up in the next book. Just like,
You're like, I'm assuming we're all going to go hunting. We're going to be a team of hunters.
Yeah.
And we'll all have a specialty.
Oh, so yeah, everyone loved it except my wife, and she actually was refusing to. She told me she was going to not read Becoming the Boogeyman until it was out in paperback. She said that way through all the appearances and signings and all, and the gatherings, and when she sees friends, she'd be able to say, I haven't read it yet, but I did catch her read night on her Kindle. So I was like,
busted.
Yeah. But
Nice.
she's not a fan, and it's weird writing about myself. I mean, when I sent it to my agent, she was, like I said, I wasn't kidding, that her reaction was kind of like, huh, okay, yeah, I'll give it a read.
Do you know you? Do you know you?
Yeah, and it was twofold because she knows I get a lot of invitations to go places, and I turn them all down. And she's like, including places that are like right where she lives, out in Colorado. There was like a world of horror or something, and a couple other things, signing events, book conferences. And I'm just like, nah, I would rather, I'm better served to stay home and work. And I'm definitely behind the scenes. I don't like. So when I told her I was the main character, she's like, what? It was doubly. What the hell are you talking about? And fortunately, I still remember she took 2 weeks to finish reading it, and she got back and she's like, all right, you won me over. And I was like, oh, thank God. Because I didn't know what I was going to do next.
She didn't question like your nature and be like, oh, you're real psycho.
At least not to me. She probably did it with my editor, but they really loved it too. It was the only place we showed it to. And so it was weird. And when it was done, I was like, don't worry, I'm never writing about myself again. Then I signed this 2-book deal with them. And the idea that I had was the first chapter of Becoming, where it ends with the reveal of who the body in the bag was.
Mm-hmm.
There's that connection with the first book. I was mowing the lawn one day, and that idea came to me fully formed. And I was like, shit, now I got to write it. Because I said, look, if anyone who enjoyed Chasing the Boogeyman can read that first chapter and not like want to tear through the pages to get to the ending, I'll be surprised. And I don't usually have that confidence. You will never hear me say, I can't wait for you guys to read my next book. It's so good. I'm a pretty confident dude, but it's like, no, I could never, because for all I know, it's shit. I don't know. Just because my editor, liked it and blah, blah, blah.
It's really subjective.
That was a bit of a sad twist for me though, because I kind of put them. I read them not exactly sequentially, but pretty close. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I just just knew her. I do love the line though. He's wearing a mask underneath his mask.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that. I still think about it. Like, it's a great line.
That encompasses what my writing is about. Is it's usually about the human monsters, and it's usually about, and it's the whole small town thing. And obviously it applies to the big cities and everywhere else, but it's that whole thing where for the most part, people aren't always what they seem. And for the most part, people are wearing masks, and it just depends on what's under there, and I had that understanding really young, where I understood that just because I felt like I was on the set of the Wonder Years, which didn't exist back then, and those like, glowing golden behind the closed curtains, there was still that big part of me like, you don't know what's going on behind those curtains, dude.
Well, you were crawling under their bushes and looking in their windows, right?
Yeah, in some cases, I absolutely was.
You knew more than most.
Yeah.
For better or worse, probably.
That's a good way to pull it back around. I'm usually interested in where a lot of the inspiration comes from, but It's all it right there.
It really is. The stories I told, all my friends to scare them and to scare myself as a kid, like walking up the driveway of the Myers Field or just walking home from 7-Eleven, because we walked down there at, 11 o'clock at night. We were supposed to be spending the night at somebody's house. And we realized we had 3 quarters between us. So you know what? We were going to 7-Eleven to play Space Invaders right then and there.
Yes.
So yeah, on the way home, it's like, you're already creeped out. So it's like, why not make it worse? So those stories that I told, they really are. That's what I'm doing now. It's just those kind of same campfire stories, or the same, what goes bump in the night stories. They're not real, they're, like I said, they're not super elaborate as far as the plotting and twists and turns. It's more just about kind of going back to those old chestnuts of what scares you.
I love it.
What better than the boogeyman when it comes to that? And that's where that came from.
Yeah.
You know what? I've always wanted to write a book about the boogeyman in whatever form, because everyone can relate.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm tickled that it happened that way, even though I'm the main damn character. And one more boogeyman book, and that's it.
Right.
I assume you're going to space, right? In the next one?
I'm going underground. Journey to the center. That's where
subterranean.
Yep, that's where that bastard lives.
Yes, me and Elon Musk are going to drill the center of the earth and find him. That's great.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you all day, even though this is really fun.
Great.
I can keep talking about horror forever.
It's opening day too.
Oh yeah, I got a game in half an hour.
Aaron's not a big sports ball fan, but
I at least know it's opening day, though.
that's good.
Everyone does, yeah.
Yeah, of course. All right. So at the end, we usually like to pull us back around to hometown. I'm assuming you still identify Edgewood as hometown.
Yeah, we live in Bel Air, which is like 15 minutes from where I grew up. But yeah, Edgewood will always be home for me. I was kind of hard on Edgewood and becoming the boogeyman because it's changed over the years.
Sure. Yeah.
To some people, they think it's always been that way. Like I said, some people are like, you grew up in a different Edgewood than me. And I'm like, no, I really didn't. But yeah, I love Edgewood. And I love, I did a talk last week to a bunch of librarians and teachers, and it was here in Bel Air, but that's what I told them. I'm like, they kind of, the secret is, if you're from Edgewood and you ask, I turn down all these things, but if you're from Edgewood or the vicinity and you ask me to do something, it's like, I'm going to say yes, because I got a soft spot for it, because this is the place that kind of made me. And I'm super grateful that I get to do this. So I'm like, people are going to find that quick.
So the question is, I don't want to say, I was going to say Stephen King comes to town. How about this? Another writer, somebody else that you want to show around for the day, comes in, you pick them up at noon, you've got through the evening. What are you guys doing?
That's a good question. You know what? My life pretty much revolves around food. So I'm taking them someplace good to eat, depending on what they like. And if they want to get the tour of the old hometown, I'm always happy to do that. Like I'll do it like every other week if I got enough people to show it to, because it's just such a part of. And what's cool is with Boogeyman, a lot of people do kind of want to see some of the sites, and there's a lot of readers who have come and done their own tours of Edgewood, so that's kind of neat. Cool. But yeah, if I've got someone coming in, I'm in a nice spot, even though I'm right in the hardest center of Bel Air. We've got like a nice grove of trees and a pond on the property and all that, and so we can kind of stay here and enjoy ourselves. But like I said, I'm a big people are always like, how are you not 300 pounds? Because my life is pretty much revolves around food. I wake up and I'm like, I think I'm having this for dinner. And my wife just looks at me and shakes her head.
I feel the same way. I work out relentlessly so that I can eat a lot and drink more.
Yeah, I need to start working out again, man. This book has like killed my schedule.
Well, before you do that, where are you going to eat?
Yeah. Tonight I'm staying home because it's opening day. So
how about before you get on the treadmill and somebody comes to visit, where are you taking them to eat?
Oh, you know what? It depends. If they wanted Mexican, we'd probably go to Tolteca down the street where they know me by name.
Yep.
Italian, we'd probably go to Margaritas where they also know me by name. And they, they like found it way after the fact that I'm a writer. It's just all about, here comes Rich.
Right.
I've always wanted my own table. When Becoming the Boogeyman came out, someone up north named a sandwich after me. They own a sandwich shop, and they named the sandwich after the Boogeyman. And I'm like, that's almost like the pinnacle. But what the pinnacle is I have my own table somewhere.
Yeah, that's up there though. What kind of sandwich is it?
Oh, you know what? I don't remember. I have a screenshot of it. It was it was like a hardcore sandwich shop. So it's like, it wasn't like something simple like a White Russian. It was like
right.
crazy combo that they probably nixed off the menu after like a month, but it doesn't matter. I got the screenshot. It existed.
Cool.
I don't like mustard or mayonnaise, so I would have to really have editorial control over this whole like sandwich situation.
Well,
At some point, I'd be like, all right, no, that's
What
very nice.
like, what do you put on a sandwich then?
You don't want to know. You don't want to know. There was a period of my teens when it was just ketchup, just everything dipped in ketchup. I know.
Were you 6 years old through your teens?
Yes, I still am.
That's my youngest son though. Whether it's chicken nuggets or this or that, it's like ketchup, and it's like and a lot of ketchup. So and he's 21, so you're not alone.
Yeah, you don't shake it. My son now is Chick-fil-A sauce. Everything is Chick-fil-A sauce. Grilled cheese, nuggets, vegetables, doesn't matter. Anything. If you put Chick-fil-A sauce on, he's happy.
Yeah, and I'll eat Chick-fil-A, but I still think that's like one of the most overrated because my sons are like, they're like fanatical about Chick-fil-A, and their friends are like, oh, I want Chick-fil-A again. And I'm like, Jesus. So yeah. I need to have a food blog. That's what everyone always says, because it's my life is about that. We're going to Boston. My son's team, lacrosse team at UVA, plays Harvard this Saturday. And that was I texted Stephen King to ask, you got a bookstore rec, which he did. And then I texted like 5 other people to ask about food and restaurants.
Oh, I got some good food and drink recs in Boston. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Send me an email.
I will. I traveled a lot for work, and all of my research before I traveled was always revolving around where to eat and drink.
That's me, man. That's us. That's wherever my kid has had an away game, and it's been a lot now after high school and 2.5 years of college. That's our main thing, is always to find a good place to eat, and it can't be too dressed up, because you're not getting me to get dressed up to go eat. But
no. Casual.
There's always, and I'm always in the hunt for like the perfect cheesesteak and all that. So
perfect. Cool. I'll send some good recommends then.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right. This has been great. Thanks for giving us your time. This has been fun.
Yeah,
Indeed, super fun.
Yeah. Anytime, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it. And just let me know if there's any way I can help.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, man. It's great talking to you.
Thanks, guys.
See you. Have a good day.
You too.